Right, okay. First of all, can I warmly welcome all of you to today's summit on turning a corner on race equality in medicine. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Dr. Chaand Nagpaul. I'm a GP and I chair the British Medical Association Council. And I'll also be chairing the first half of this summit. I'd like to first provide you with some housekeeping information. First, there is no scheduled fire alarm, so if the alarm does sound, please make your way to the courtyard and then out to the front of BMA House through the archway on the other side of the road, following the instructions of fire marshals. Hopefully, obviously, that shouldn't happen, but in case. The event is not being webcast live, but there will be staff filming and taking photographs throughout the day. So if you would not like to be filmed or photographed, please indicate this to a member of BMA staff who are wearing black lanyards, and they'll give you a sticker to indicate to any people filming or taking photos. So please make that known if you don't want to be filmed or photographed. Another bit of housekeeping is I've been told by several that you'd like to have a slightly earlier finish. We're multicultural, but when it comes to supporting England, it seems to be we're together. So I'll do what I can. I can't make any promises, but we're looking at whether we can cut down on some of the lunch or the afternoon break, and I'll come back to you later. So let me just start by saying that the BMA and I am extremely proud to be hosting today's summit at a time when we're celebrating the 70th anniversary of the NHS and reaffirming those really fundamental core principles of the founding principles of equity and fairness. Because I don't think it's right that we should think of equity and fairness in a selective sense in the way we look after patients. We have to think of the NHS embodying these principles to its workforce and across the NHS. And so we need an NHS that has equality and fairness in the professional lives of everyone who works within it. And I think that's a core part of today's summit. We know that racial inequality continues to afflict the NHS, but I do want to say we have made huge progress in understanding the issues over the last few decades, and some of the speakers were very much at the onset of describing this phenomenon. I mean, just to tell you for myself, 31 years ago, when I applied to my vocational training scheme. In those days, general practice was actually the most popular, you would hard to believe, the most popular postgraduate specialty. And I had 9 rejections just basically on sending my CV. And it mystified me that life was like that. But I, on the 10th occasion, actually went to Charing Cross, met the postgraduate dean and said, "This is who I am. When you see my application, this is me." And I was interviewed. I got the job, and there were 180 applicants for 2 places. Hard to believe that was general practice. In those days, when I got my partnership, there were 80 applicants for 1 position, and I joined a partnership with 2 very nice female Caucasian partners, and I asked them, how did you select me? And it's absolutely true. This is what they said. They said we had 2 piles, UK graduates and non-UK graduates. You were in the right pile. And it's hard to believe that is the way life was. And we have, let's I think acknowledge, we have moved a long way from those days. But the tragedy is there is still so much more to do, and that's what today is about. So we know there is inequalities in entrance to medical school. We know that at medical school there is differential attainment between BME and white doctors, and what's inexplicable is that when you look at BME doctors who've been born in the UK and therefore have no cultural issues and not understanding the way the system works, we know they don't pass as well as their white counterparts. We know that when medical students become doctors, there is differential attainment in regards to postgraduate examinations. That itself then leads to a cascade of worsening career progression. We know that independent analysis, we held a conference last autumn on differential attainment, and Catherine Wolfe came along, did a lot of research and says, you know what, it's got nothing to do with ability. So we know there's something going on that isn't about ability. I was speaking to Ramesh is here, Ramesh Mehta from BAPIO, who tells me that the membership of the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health examination, that membership examination, that examination is now being held in India for Indian doctors who have never set foot in the UK, and they pass that exam at higher rates of success than Indian doctors in the UK who know the system of a UK examination. They do worse. And I just find that bizarre. What is it about being in the NHS that you can't do as well as a doctor who isn't in the NHS doing the same examination? So there's something just not right. We know that BME doctors disproportionately suffer greater bullying and harassment, and that again has a cascade of consequences. If you feel harassed, you just cannot perform as well as you should. You're not going to be able to fight your corner as well as others, and that may play a part in some of the issues around complaints. We know that BME doctors are more likely to be referred to the GMC from their employer and more likely to suffer sanctions. Again, an interesting point is that it's not patients who are complaining more, it's the employing organisation, which makes it so much sadder that there's a greater sense of justice and fairness amongst patients than there is amongst the NHS as an employer. But the other thing is that the NHS, and this picture that I've described, is completely out of kilter with other professional sectors, such as IT or business. And if you were to look at giants like Microsoft and Google, you will just see that all the head positions, from the CEO of Google, they're populated with the names of BME doctors, in particular those from the South Asian continent. And what it really shows is that BME doctors are actually inherently very bright. They're very determined. They're creative. They adapt. And so I haven't quite understood why in the NHS we don't see that same repetition of success. And what is it about the culture in the NHS that isn't bringing out the true potential and talent of BME doctors? We often focus, and rightly so as the BMA, about the unfairness of racial inequality on those who are affected by it, the BME doctors. But you know, it is also deeply unfair for patients and for the NHS, because we have a health service where patients are being denied the full potential and capability of its medical workforce, and there is a really strong moral argument that we need to get this right, not just for ourselves, but actually for patients. Now, the purpose of today's summit is not about focusing purely on the diagnosis. I mean, we are, as I said, a long way forward from 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago. You will hear today about these issues, the issues of inequality. But today's summit really is to go beyond the talking about racial bias into proposing solutions on what actually needs to happen and change, so that we can all be part of an NHS that has true equal opportunity and achievement for any doctor, whoever they are. We have actually a fantastic lineup of speakers. We put a lot of thought into who would be coming to today's event. So you've got people who spent a lot of time researching this area, a lot of expertise, representatives of various BME organisations, but also yourselves as delegates. This is not an event where I see this as a didactic event. It's a participative event, and so you will be contributing today to what I hope will be change. So one of the ground rules for today, for everyone, and we've said this to the speakers, is by all means talk about the problems, but please let us talk about what need to change and be solutions focused. Having said that, I also think we all recognise there is no silver bullet, there is no magic bullet, and neither will the solution be a single solution. It will be multifactorial. Some of the solutions won't be instant, but that doesn't matter. Let us today actually define the range of issues that need to happen to what needs to change to achieve equity. Now, the BMA, one of the defining features about the BMA is that we represent the entire medical workforce, doctors working in all settings, and that's why you'll be hearing from doctors working in different settings, and we've made sure that the delegates here represent the diversity of the profession. But we also have many of you here who yourselves are experts. So what I want you to think about today is that the BMA is hosting a coalition event, an alliance with friends and people who are genuinely interested in making a difference, and finally turning this corner, as the title of today is, of race equality in medicine. This event forms part of a much bigger initiative that I launched after becoming Chair of Council, which is a project called A Future Vision for the NHS, which is called Caring, Supportive and Collaborative. And so this is one part of describing, the profession describing an NHS which provides the profession with support and learning, not a climate of fear or blame. An NHS that provides fair and equal opportunity for any doctor to reach their full potential, to do their very best professionally for patients. And a climate where there is recognition and reward on merit and merit alone. And that is today's part of that wider project. But I also don't want today to finish, like so many of these events finish, where we actually have a really inspiring day, which I hope it is, but then we go home and actually nothing changes. You know, I really hope that today is a springboard for change, and a change that will be a collective effort, and one that will define every part of the system that needs to change, from government, NHS England, regulators, employers, and including ourselves as doctors, and I would count the BMA in that. So it is a collective effort. So after today, what we will have is a web page of today's event, and also ongoing material. The speakers will be filmed, and you'll be able to, for those who are not here, will be able to view those. We'll have some blogs. I very much hope we'll have a follow-up event in time, and holding ourselves collectively to account to see whether there has been any movement in tackling this issue. And I'm very happy for the BMA to hold that ring. Also, just want to say that please feel free to tweet throughout the day. We want to show that we're holding this event and that we're trying to really achieve change. We also have a hashtag called NHS Future, as you can see, which is part of, as I said, this bigger project. We have facilities for Vox Pops today. So at lunchtime we have Matt, who will be in the Worcester room, and you'll be told where that is. So, you know, have your 20 seconds of message, what you want to say about what needs to change, and that will be your opportunity. You know, please do avail of that, and we will be putting out your voice as part of this collective effort. So that's at lunchtime in the Worcester room. So please go along to that. I think that's it from my end. So again, a warm welcome, and I'd like to now move on to our very first speaker, who is, actually my briefing note is not in front of me, but I know exactly, I don't need a briefing note to introduce Aneez. So I'm really delighted to invite Aneez Esmail to speak. And I mean, most of you will know Aneez, but Aneez is a GP, he's been a GP for decades. He has fought the corner for equality for 4 decades, and he's going to be speaking about reflecting on the past, but equally importantly, what needs to change for the future. Welcome, Aneez.
Okay, no overheads, so I hope I can speak to you directly. When I was first asked to come and speak here, I always try and think about the audience that I'll have. And when it was first put to me, I was under the impression it was going to be an audience that really was trying to, maybe didn't understand so much about what's happening in the NHS, and in a way I would have tempered what I was saying. But I can see from sitting in the room many, many people who I know who have also fought in the struggle against racism. So I'm going to make some assumptions. I'm going to say some hard truths as well, because I hope that this audience will understand and will in a way reflect on what we need to do to go forward. And when we talk about reflection, and Chaand mentions the anniversary of the NHS, I remember 20 years ago, 50th anniversary, I was about to go to America for a fellowship. And I remember there was, as usual, a crisis in the NHS. And the government called a summit. This was before the election, which brought in the new administration, the Labour administration. And it was quite interesting. At that time, still, I mean, the number of ethnic minorities in the NHS has always been about a third. And yet, this delegation that went to meet the government to talk about the NHS and its problems could be summed up in 3 words: male, pale, and stale. And that was how the NHS has, in a way, expressed itself for so long. But I do know that now, 70 years on, it would be a very different delegation that would go and meet the government. Probably Chaand would be in there. People like Aradaza would be in there. There would be people from Aravind Madan, who's heading up primary care in England. So it would be a very fundamental difference. There'd be women there as well, the chief medical officer and others. You know, so something fundamentally has changed. And if you look at things like the medical school intake, if you look at how merit awards are given, you can see that huge amount has changed. When I was first started my campaign, there were no medical directors who were ethnic minorities, and yet subsequent people like Umesh and Jayesh and lots of others have become. And you look at this, and Chaand is right to say that absolutely things have changed and moved on. Yes, let's take that as a given. We aren't where we were 50 years ago. But. And what is the but? Sitting in the audience is David Selly. I know something that prompted this meeting was Bawa Garba's case. And I was at a meeting at Sussex with people from the CPS, Crown Prosecution Service, and we were discussing the issue of medical manslaughter, which the whole Bawa Garba case and David's case brought up as well. And then we have the Snowy White Pete's report, which Roger wrote and I helped edit. And we have this continuing issue about the GMC and the fact that there is a disproportionate number of people that are disciplined. And as Chaand says, not because it is patients complaining, but because it is the system that brings them there. And so you have to ask ourselves, I ask myself all the time, what has gone wrong? What is the problem still we are facing now in this 70th anniversary? And I want to do it by talking about my experience for one, okay? Because I think it helped me with my analysis. So those of you who know my work, I first published my paper in 1993 when I did the CV study, the famous CV study that got me arrested. It also got me accused of professional misconduct by my favorite organization, the GMC. And then subsequently, I did a study on medical schools, where I showed that, again, ethnic minorities were less likely to get a place, even if they had the same grade. And in my frustration, because there was no change, and everyone makes these horrible noises saying, yes, we know it's a problem, we will do something, but it takes time and all that. In my frustration, I sat down with my co-author, Sam Everington, and we wrote to every single head teacher in the country. And we said, listen, if you have bright ethnic minority students, don't send them to these medical schools, because they will have much better chance if you send them to these other places. And you know what that got? It got me a legal threat from a dean of the medical school who called my dean, who called me into the office and said, be careful. He said, be careful. And at that time, there was something that was told to me at the time of my CV study when I was attacking the GMC and when I was accused of what I was accused of. And my professor, my head of department, long time retired, came up to me and says, "Aneez, be careful. The medical establishment has long memories." And there was part of my answer, the medical establishment having long memories. And then it came on, so I did work on merit awards and showed the discrepancy and so on. And then finally I got asked to be on the Shipman inquiry, which I sat on for 6 years. And we unearthed a huge problem of problems in the NHS, not about racism, but so many impacted on it. And what was interesting is that I was asked by the BMJ to write an article about the Shipman inquiry. And it was very critical of the GMC at that time. And by the way, I'm not against the GMC per se, okay? So I'll just use that as an example. Very critical. And what was the response? What was the response? A letter from their lawyers accusing me of saying things that were actually private to the inquiry. And in the same breath, they wrote to my boss at that time, the Chief Medical Officer, and accused me of actually, I was a civil servant then, I was working for the Department of Health, accused me of breaking secrets in effect. And it took my chairman to write and say everything I had said had been said publicly. And where I had expressed my own opinion, I had said exactly that. Medical establishment, long memories, is what occurs to me. And then finally, not so long ago, 2013, I'm asked to write a report on differential attainment. I've learned something in the process. And before I agreed to do it, I insisted that written in the contract would be my right to publish in my own way. And what was the result when I did it? I put my paper into publication, it was sent by peer review, and I get a phone call from Fiona Godley a week before the paper's been published. "Aneez," she says, "we have a problem. The RCGP has told me that if we publish this paper, they will sue me. I'm sorry to ask, but can you sit down with my lawyers and do it?" In the end, she went ahead with it, and this all came out in the press. Medical establishment. And that's where my analysis leads to. You see, the problem is that we have dealt with racism at an individual level. We fight for things like equality merit awards. We fight for better processes in medical school intakes. We fight to get into the leadership positions, into the directorships and so on. But this is all at the individual level. And the problem is the establishment that we live. You see, the thing is that if you look, for example, at the RCGP exam, the differential attainment is still there. It's worse. It's worse. But the RCGP will hide behind the issue of patient safety. So I sit with trainees, ethnic minorities in our inner city practice, who are practicing independently. We monitor them, we support them, we say they're good enough and everything else. They turn up to do the exam and they fail. Suddenly, overnight, they've become unsafe. I can't understand that. And it's rubbish, of course. If you look at the GMC, they keep telling us that we don't understand why there is a problem. So we're going to do more research to find out. And again, it's important we protect the public. Patient safety is now the catch-all for everyone. I'm one of the experts on patient safety in this country. And it is complete and utter rubbish. Because you hide behind things. But what you're doing is protecting a status quo. You're protecting the establishment. And this is what I say to organizations, in all of them. If you walk by certain things, which is what is happening with the RCGP, which is what's happening with the GMC frequently, you actually accept it. You accept it. You walk by and you accept it because you do nothing. And that is a big problem. That is a big problem. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? I want to ask why we haven't changed things, but acknowledging also that we have changed things. As I said, I think one of the problems is that because we follow this individual approach to things, because we do that, we also, without recognizing it, accept this sort of individual aggrandizement, you know. We take great pride when we get offered honours, and we take great pride when we get our merit awards and so on. And that becomes our struggle. That becomes our struggle. It is, in fact, a tick box mentality. Because, you know, yes, we do this, we have equality, we have the right people on the panel and everything else. Still massive differentials, but we sort of accept it. We're going to go along slowly. And you know what, Aneez, don't worry, because in 20 years' time, when we come to the 90th anniversary of the NHS, things will have changed. I probably won't be alive, but things will have changed. So take that with you to your grave. But the biggest problem, I think, the biggest problem is us in this room. I think that we have fragmented our campaign. We have fragmented our campaign. And for that, I take a lesson from Amartya Sen, the great Indian economist and Nobel Prize winner. And would you believe it, Amartya, he's an economist, but he writes about issues around conflict and race and violence and so on. And in one of his books, which I remember reading, he talked about the problem of racism. And he talked about it in the context, of course, of partition. And he talked about how he observes the servant of their family being beaten up and murdered by a crowd, lynched in effect. Yeah? And he was a Muslim. But up to that point, up to partition, he was never a Muslim. He was just a person, a working class person trying to make a life for himself and his family. Yet that is what made the mob turn against him. And what Amartya Sen says is the problem with racism is it forces us to go back into our singular identities. Suddenly, I become an Indian doctor. Suddenly, I become a Muslim doctor. Suddenly, I become an ethnic minority doctor. But you know, fundamentally, I am a doctor. But what that does, that racism does, it drives you back into that. And so you then find comfort in others like you. And you fight this identity politics. So it's a problem. I remember when I was asked to be chair of the BMA Race Equality Committee, which was quite a first for the BMA, because I have always refused to be a member of the BMA and never will be a member of, sorry, Chaand, about the BMA. But the problem is this, right, is that we call this meeting of all the people interested in ethnic minorities, and 40 different organizations registered and turned up for that event. What does that do for a campaign against anti-racism? I grew up in this country fighting racism at university. You know what? We all called ourselves black. Now I can't call myself black in certain groups. Say, but you're not black. But black is a political term. Black is a political term. And we all joined together to fight racism at that time. White and black and Asian and Afro-Caribbean and African. We did distinguish. Because you know what? The state didn't distinguish. They didn't put the boot in harder because you were a Muslim or whether you're an Afro-Caribbean. You all suffered the same thing. We were fighting for the same thing. And we have lost that. We have lost that, and I blame ourselves for that. But of course, the blame is not us, but it's racism, but it's our inability to transcend that individual fight. So that's one problem. I think that we've become obsessed with reputation as well for ourselves. But again, it's how racism operates. It internalizes things. So we end up, again, seeing it about ourselves. I didn't get the chance. I didn't get the award. But you didn't get the award not because of you, not because you were a Hindu or a Muslim or anything else, because racism. And it operates all that. And the point is, racism and like gender bias go together sometimes, like brothers and sisters. So when I talk about merit awards, women still don't get the awards. So when we had the gender pay gap equality study, the NHS has one of the largest pay gap. Why? Because of merit awards. And yet what happens? We're changing. Don't worry. You as a woman sit there. You'll get your turn eventually. And I think this is the problem. Make it a problem for women. Make it a problem for ethnic minorities. But it's a problem for our organization. So I think that it is what Chaand says. You go back to the principles of what NHS is. And what is the NHS about? It is something, I'm not one of these people who believe it's a religion. But I know why I work in it. I know why all us doctors and nurses and paramedics and health visitors, I know why we work in it. We work in it because we believe in it. We believe in what it stands for. Yes, it does stand for diversity, because it states that it will treat everyone, irrespective of ability to pay. It talks about openness. It talks about power relationships between patients and doctors. It talks about tolerance. It talks about rootedness. It is something in our, how we create it. When Bevan creates it, he talks about that. He talks about this idea of having something where people don't have to worry about pain and ill health. And I have friends from all over the world, and they worry about it. In America, they worry about it. Lose their job, lose their insurance. It doesn't happen here. Something really sticks in my mind still. I remember that when I was a junior doctor working in A&E, and a man gets run over by a car and loses his leg. And actually, he's what would be called a homeless person now. Okay, he's on the streets. And you know what? I saw it. The top people came in. No one asked who he was, who he knew, what it mattered. He was just a human being, a patient. And that is what we love about the NHS. And that's all of us who work in it know that. So this commitment to the common good is critical. But where is that commitment that we as a group must fight? Because that are the principles that abide by us. I'm not against individuals having their own groups. You know, I go to a Sheffield reunion. I love it. But I'm not going to fight a campaign as Sheffield Medics of 1982. Yeah? Think of them as important. You know, we like to meet with our people. We like to meet with our friends, with people who've gone through experience. But it's not how we fight campaigns. And of course, what I'm trying to say is that this is the end result of the identity politics. And it's interesting, you see, because if you go to the RCGP now, this is one of the things that have changed. There's an exhibition there. And it's actually based on a book written by my PhD student, Julian Simpson. And it's a great book, and we had a launch event, actually, with the RCGP. So, in fact, credit to them. And we were having a discussion about it, because the RCGP wanted to celebrate the success of ethnic minorities. And Julian and I said, no, it's not about celebrating. It's about recognizing these are architects of the NHS. They had a fundamental part in building it to what it is. We don't want no celebration. We want recognition. We want you to recognize that general practice is as it is today because of ethnic minorities as well. And that's what you have to understand. And in the end, they accepted it. It was incredible, because Simon Stephen came to speak about it, and he also used those terms. Of course, we gave him a briefing about it, but he agreed with it. But this is important, that we have to understand that. Okay? We shouldn't be marginalized in this fight for equality. It is central to what the organization we work in believes in, and let's use that to fight for it. So, how might we change? So I take great things. So if you take David's case, for example, I was rung up by a white consultant, Jenny Vaughan. I don't know if she was coming today, but I don't know if she's here or not. But Jenny Vaughan, and she says to me, Aneez, there's a problem here. This can't be allowed to happen. It's outrageous what's happening here. A white doctor, a white consultant. And she got together lots of other white consultants as well. And then, of course, the ethnic minority doctors as well. And instead, in Bawa Garba's case, it was junior doctors who recognized what was at stake here. And they came up behind her and supported her. And then, if you take my own example, and my tribulations with it, in the end, actually, you know, it was the white editors of the BMJ. It was the white doctors that wrote to the GMC and supported me and said, this is outrageous what's happening. So I take away a lesson from this, that if we get out of our singular identities, if we get out of identity politics, we can change things, we can do it. I don't know how it's going to happen. I think part of what I want you to all think about today is exactly that problem. Who's going to lead it? What's going to happen? Okay? But I'm saying that there are people in this room who can do that. We need to break this identity politics. We need to understand the importance of what we have to do it. And you know, whether it's the BMA, whether it's one of the Indian doctor organizations, whoever leads it, but we've got to recognize that it is a struggle that affects us all, and we have to unite in that. And then it doesn't become about our singular identities. I don't want to go anymore to meetings of the Pakistani Doctors Association, or the Muslim Doctors Association, or Bapi or Bida and just talk about this amongst ourselves when it's all fragmented. I want some sort of unity and purpose that says this is important. And maybe what Chaand says, it's the BMA's role to do this, I don't know. I won't be part of it, Chaand, I'm afraid. But the thing is that it can, and because the majority of people do believe in it. So that could be it. So I don't have an answer to how it happens, but I know the answer in this room. And I think it's partly based on this notion of what my student Julian said. We are architects. And when we first wrote our paper, many referees rejected it, saying, you can't call them architects. Architects help design and build. Absolutely. That's why we use the word architects. We understand this. We understand the sociology of it. And I think we need to now come forward as architects and say, this is our NHS as well, and we will fight for it. And as part of that fight, we will make it the most equal organization in the world. So I hope I have said things. I may have said things that might have upset people. You may not agree with it. I think fundamentally it comes down to that. If we look at the problem, it is about the establishment. I think there are many pockets in the NHS which have done incredible things. But fundamentally, the power structures have not changed. And those power structures are primarily within the medical establishment. I know primarily doctors in here, so let's do that. But it might be the case in others. So I'm not singling them out, but that's where it is. That's where it is. And I think that is where the challenge is. Because that power structure wants to preserve its power. And by us challenging it, we are actually fundamentally altering something as well. And I think that establishment is actually cowards. Because they hide behind things like patient safety. They walk by, and then they accept it. So I want to end with really a reflection by my favourite philosopher, who cautioned me. And he said, well, Aneez, I may have interpreted the world. The point, however, is to change it. Thank you very much.
Hello? Yeah. Okay. Aneez, thank you very much. I mean, that was a honest account, and it's very much in keeping with the theme of today. And what Aneez so rightly pointed out is that we all too often look at others and look at other parts of the system to somehow sort out this whole issue. But in fact, the solution to making these changes actually resides both within those in this room and those outside, and we all can actually collectively make a change. And I was really glad that Aneez, put that responsibility back onto us. And I take responsibility as chair of the BMA Council as well. We all have to play our part. Aneez is here to answer questions for about 5 minutes. So I saw Umesh's hand go up first, and then I've got Satish's hand, and then
Chaand, first question to you.
we've got roving mics. So.
Chaand, first question to you, because I told you this is my 12th meeting. And I think if I had spent more time with my wife, I would have 12 more children. And that was the first meeting. Why should we trust BMA now when we all had many meetings? That's the first question to you. Because I know the answer. Hopefully you will tell the audience why should we trust you. Aneez, you gave a speech nearly 25 years ago to Royal College of GPs saying the same thing. I've heard you many times. I've become very emotional. But why Albert Einstein said, everybody knows, but the trick is to understand. Why do you think we have not made any progress? We have made some progress, but let me tell you, there were 5 BME chief executives at one stage. Today there are only 3. Why do you think this has happened?
Okay, I'm just going to suggest we'll take 3 questions, because we have 3 hands up, and then we'll answer them at the end, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. Satish.
Aneez, this is about your groundbreaking research about 30 years back. If you had a chance to do the same research today, what do you think would be the outcome?
Okay, and okay, so rather Christian, Dr. Schanberg. And just to tell you, others who raising their hands. There will be other opportunities to ask questions. There'll be a panel discussion this afternoon, so don't worry. I want everyone who wants to speak to have their say. And if you don't have your say, you've got the Vox Pop as well, you can say to the world. Chaand.
Thank you very much, Professor Aneez. That was an inspirational talk. Against that background, I acknowledge that all of us who are here, we have come together with a common purpose, and that is to shed that individual identity that you're talking about. But what we say is we can sit down here and talk about what we should be doing. And all of us, a commitment is shown by the presence that we are here. We are committed to bring about that change. But then the movers and shakers who can make it happen are not here. And I think those stakeholders, such as, I would have expected someone from the Clinical Leaders Network, from NHS employers, the Royal Colleges, who could make this happen. Because, we all want to make it happen. But then it cannot happen by us just wishing that it should happen. We can put in our effort, and I'm sure all of us have in some way or the other put in that effort. And I was wondering, how is it that we can get a buy-in from these other movers and shakers to make this happen in our lifetime, at least? Thank you.
Okay, so those are 3 questions. I know there are other hands that have gone up. You will have opportunity, and I'll take you next to the next set of questions. Aneez, do you want to respond to those 3 and then?
Yeah, okay. So don't forget the one that was aimed at you as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I haven't forgotten. I'll come back to that. Yes.
So Umesh, yeah, you're right. Those of you know me know that this has been my mantra for a while. Okay, but I have myself developed it, because when I first started 30 years ago, I was very much on an individual fight. I was like Chaand, not getting jobs shortlisted, and I thought, I'm going to just do something about this, and I've got to do it, really. So I have gradually come to the conclusion, and for a long time, I have to admit, I was lulled into, everyone was telling me nice things, and you're doing really well, and so on. So I do acknowledge that we have not made that transition. But as I said in my talk, Umesh, it is also about us, because we have fragmented. I mean, I remember as a medical student, there was at that time one Overseas Doctors Association. And you know what? It had Egyptian doctors, Pakistani doctors, Indian doctors, and they were fighting for one thing. And they were very successful. But they all came together as one. And of course, it's changed now. We have ethnic minority doctors. 40% of my medical school in Manchester is ethnic minorities. And I don't think that they would identify as an overseas doctor or with an overseas doctors organization. But they came behind Bawagaba, they came behind David. So they understand the issue of racism. So paradoxically, what is lacking is leadership from within this room. And that's my point. That's my point. We need to be the leaders who will be able to show the example. And I think that that's very important. Your point, Satish, is what would happen now? Well, I know I wouldn't be accused of professional misconduct, and I know I won't get arrested about it, because this has now become a mainstream way of identifying whether there's discrimination or not. It won't be so great in terms of, because it's quite interesting. I mean, when I graduated, I was in a class at Sheffield of 120, and 10 were ethnic minorities, and all left except myself and one other maybe, I think. Why? Because we said we'd never get a chance of becoming consultants in the NHS or becoming principals in general practice. So they're all abroad now. And that's changed. You can go to any A&E department, you can go to any surgical team, you see the consultants. So of course, that battle, I don't want to say we haven't got there, but the next challenge is at that level where Jayesh and Umesh used to work, at getting to medical directors, with Roger identified in terms of the snowy white peaks. So it's slightly different, but it shouldn't also become an internalized struggle about just getting the medical director, because, it's great that Chaand, I think it's just stunning that, we've had Mayur Lakhani as the president of the RCG, previous chair of council, Chaand and what he's doing. But of course, we can't put everything on their shoulders. Because they have to fight the system. And we don't know all the tribulations that go on and the difficulties that they have. But I know it's not straightforward and not easy, because they are part or trying to change that establishment, which has long memories, as I said. So I think that is the issue. And your point, I hope I've answered it by what I've just said, that I think that fundamentally it needs leadership, someone from within our organization to say, okay, this is what's going to happen. We speak with one voice, we bring everyone together. Now, I'm not that person to do that. Actually, I'm coming to the end of my career in the NHS. I'm not that person to do that. But I think that there are some people who will carry that baton. But the first task must be to meet with all those people who have their own little identifiable organizations and bring them together. That will take in itself years. And getting some sort of common charter, common purpose. And then we use that as a means of saying, right, we are now part of this great organization and we are going to make it. It isn't yet, but we will make it the greatest organization.
Okay, so I haven't forgotten that there was a question directed at the BMA, and I think the question was, Umesh, from you. You had asked, what was it about? What is the BMA going to do, or what trust do you have? You know, I think first of all, I mean, I can't speak about the past. I've been in this post for 1 year, and whenever I have seen unfairness, because I very much believe in that principle, I've tried to tackle it. I met David Selou just literally, 3 weeks ago? And I invited you to come here. Thank you very much for coming. And I think that sort of demonstrates the way I'm trying to tackle it. Jenny Vaughan should be here. I've been hugely impressed at her dedication in fighting the cause on behalf of fairness. So I just want to say that the question that how will the BMA sort this out is the wrong question. Completely the wrong question. The BMA cannot in itself sort it out any more than I would expect an organisation here representing BME doctors to sort it out. We have to, in alliance, as friends, as colleagues, as a coalition, create a force of argument that sells itself. And as I said, that force of argument is because it's the right thing to do, right for doctors, right for patients, right for the NHS. It's the right values that we need to sort this out. I also want to be realistic. I said so, that there is no magic bullet. We're going to have to come and deal with this in multiple manners. There are organisations, Dr. Schallenberg rightly mentioned, some of those that need to make the change are going to be in government, are going to be in Health Education England, NHS England, regulators, and some of them are here today. And it doesn't matter if they're not here today, because today isn't the time that everything will change. Today is creating a springboard. And what will happen and what will change is if we can leave this room really understanding what needs to change and take those messages out, and each of us become leaders in delivering that message. And that's what today is about. And what the BMA will rightly do is we will hold the ring on behalf of the profession we represent. We will enable new leaders, voices, to bear fruit, to actually have a voice. I've said again, any of you, please do the Vox Pop. We'll circulate your messages on your behalf. So that's what we will do. And I would like to be, for all of us actually, to be held to account as to the success of change in the months to come. And I would like us to meet again in the fullness of time and see, have we made a difference? And we all need to take collective ownership of that. So I'm now going to move on to the next speaker. Before I do that, I just want to thank Aneez, and from a very personal perspective, to say, you know, we come across a lot of people who rightly want to speak about what's right or wrong. But, you know, Aneez is a genuine guy. He is an absolutely genuine advocate for change, and he lives by his principles. And anyone who knows him will know he lives by his principles. It's one thing talking about things, it's another actually living it. And he has contributed immensely over the years. And even the little bit he said has been very modest. So I really want to say thank you for being with us here today with us. Right, now I said to you at the beginning, this is not meant to be an event where you just hear from the great and good people who've been representing organisations. We want this to be an event where we actually hear from the grassroots, people who've really made very small individual but big changes to within themselves and to those around them.